never, never, never watch this movie again. Never, never watch this movie again. Never, never watch this movie again. November is coming to a close, and as you recall last year, I gave you guys a little martini olive, a little extra something, and I gave this extra review of a side thing related to James Bond. Now, as you all recall last year, I made a very strong point that I was not going to review certain other movies that claim to honor the name of James Bond, but frankly, I would respectfully, and in some cases disrespectfully, disagree. And this movie is one of them. But I did an internet poll, you guys said this one, so here we go. Never Say Never Again was the legally sanctioned remake of Thunderball. And the reason why I say legally sanctioned was because this film was produced by Kevin McClory. Now, hardcore Bond historians are going to remember that Kevin McClory was something of a hemorrhoid to Eon Productions, that this guy wanted to try and get ahead of the wave that was being started by Cubby Broccoli and Saltzman when they were really getting the franchise fired up. Kevin McClory realized there was something going on here, so he had bought a whole bunch of the rights to many of Ian Fleming's work, among them Thunderball. Now, if you recall, if you look at the opening credits of Thunderball, you'll actually see Kevin McClory's name on there. And that's because a deal had to be made between Eon Productions and him in order for them to get to make Thunderball, because they needed to make Thunderball because that was a vital component in the history of Bond with Spectre. Matter of fact, in the books, that was Bond's first encounter with Spectre and with Blofeld. So it was kind of an important one to get made. Of course, Thunderball gets made. It's one of the best Bond films ever made. Ken McClory was still hell-bent to make his own Bond franchise. And, well, unfortunately, the only way he could make it was that it was a remake of Thunderball. It's still up in the other whether or not he actually wanted to do a remake of Thunderball, but unfortunately, this is what he was stuck with. And, well, this is what we were all stuck with. So I guess to his credit, he was trying his best to make it the best way he possibly could. And this film was made somewhere in the early 80s, and one of the things he did was that he got a hold of a filmmaker who earned some clout in recent years because of his deft direction of The Empire Strikes Back. That's right, this was directed by Irvin Kershner. And credit where it's due, it's a very well-mounted production. You definitely feel like money got thrown at it. And it's even been said that more money was thrown into this than the other Bond film that was being released at the same time, or at least a little bit prior, somewhere in the same time zone to this film, Octopussy. So the budget is definitely there. But the big get that Kevin McClory got was convincing Sean Connery to come back. And in fact, the title of the film, Never Say Never Again, was based on an anecdote of Connery's where he made a vow to his wife that he would never play Bond again after Diamonds Are Forever. Promise broken. Wasn't it worth it? As you can kind of see, I've got a lot of complimentary things to say about this film. I mean, yes, well-mounted production, very competently made when it comes to the tech aspects, when it comes to the visual. Hits the story where everything falls apart. Now, this is a remake, which means that we're going to be judging it on remake terms. And because Thunderball did this story so much better, of course we're going to keep comparing one and the other, and we're going to determine which one is the superior one. And Never Say Never Again suffers in so many regards. And you feel bad because there were some aspect where he was trying to follow the book a bit more. In this case, it is Maximilian Largo, like in the book. Fatima Blush is the femme fatale, as opposed to Fiona Volpe. Unfortunately, there's so much stuff that makes the film completely tone deaf, and you don't know if it's trying to be a 80s kitsch action film, or is it actually trying to be a Bond movie. And a lot of times, it's more often 80s camp than Bond movie. First, let's get the primary thing out of the way. Sean Connery back as Bond. Around this point, he was actually around the same age that Roger Moore was when, I think around the time when he did Octopussy. They were practically around the same age group. He definitely still looks like he can kick wholesale ass, and he still looks like he's very competent on when it comes to stunts. And I will say the integration of Stuntman 2 Sean Connery is a lot more seamless compared to Roger Moore in, say, A View to a Kill. So in the action department, Connery still seems like he can hold his own. And it even slightly appears like Connery is enthusiastic about this project. It's been said that he wanted to do this because he wanted to try and play Bond at an older age. And you know what? That would be kind of a cool idea, to adapt the story of Thunderball to Bond at an older age and seeing if he still had it in him. In a way, it's kind of like what they're trying to attempt what was achieved very, very well in Skyfall. But the problem is with this is that they start off strong doing that, doing the whole thing at the spa, and of course M talking about whether or not Bond can still cut it in the field in lieu of the fact that he's, definitely getting on in years. But pretty much as soon as he leaves the spa, that whole story is done. And they don't do anything with it. And it's a shame, because you could have taken us down some uncharted territory. Territory which really, with the exception of Skyfall, they haven't really explored as well as you think they should. And that was actually a damn shame. Pretty much as soon as he gets out onto the mission, it's back to the same old hijinks. And a lot of it does not come off as well as it should. Particularly in scenes when he's seducing women, whether it be betting Fatima Blush or even with Domino, in this case played by Kim Basinger. Basinger! Am I alone in wanting to smack anyone who still says Basinger? I'm sure she still wants to. I've always been kind of iffy on Kim Basinger. Honestly, I didn't really think she deserved that Oscar. I think the only performance where I thought she actually really gave it her all was 8 Mile. But for the most part, she's always been, for me, kind of either okay, or And this was one of the uhs, because I just never felt that she was an actress who could really convey any sort of emotional depth. And I think that's always been my problem with her. And this one, and I will say this isn't entirely on her. I also feel that the writing of Domino in this particular iteration just was not up to measure. I will say I actually really dug Claudine Auger as Domino in the original film. But not only that, I really loved her banter with Bond. And I think a lot of it is because Bond gets to meet her a lot sooner, and they actually seem to develop something of a rapport. And through that, you actually get to know Domino a bit better as a character. You actually get to see why she's actually a very good character. And it all culminates in that beautiful scene when she finds out that her brother's dead, and it's actually a sad scene. Whereas this, they just kind of gloss over it. Bond tells Domino in this version, and she's like, what? And then they just cut the scene off, and then there's another part where she tries to confront him on the issue, but he immediately distracts her because he's got to make out with her in order to piss off Largo. And it doesn't work. And Kim Basinger, in lieu of whatever effort she was trying to put into this movie, she's not given much to work with. And that is one little problem to go with the whole slew of problems this movie's got. And then you got Maximilian Largo, here played by Klaus Maria Brandauer. Again, remake standards. You're pitting him against Adolfo Celli. Adolfo Celli had great presence, he had a great voice, he had such considerable menace utilizing so much subtlety. Klaus Maria Brandauer, not so much. First off, appearance-wise, he just comes off as a preppy pervert. You look at him, and unfortunately, there's a lot of scenes vindicating that claim. There's one of the first times you see him, he has a little secret computer room conveniently placed behind a one-way mirror, looking into Domino's dance hall, and you're seeing him, and you're seeing his back to dance, and the first thing that went in my head, fap, 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 fap. And I was like, oh, this is not the way you introduce your Bond villain. Bond villains can be lecherous. That's not the thing you lead with. You don't start with the first way you establish your villain is that he's a pervert. That's just one of the things that's just going to come with being a Bond villain, because it's a position of power that they can put themselves into. But even then, there's levels of perversity that just don't inspire much menace, because there's perverts like this who drill holes into girls' locker rooms in colleges, and you don't think of them as nefarious villains, you just think of them as assholes. In many cases, he's pathetic. He is extremely pathetic. Not compared to Largo, who, even when he fails, he always maintains his composure, he never loses his cool, and he always finds ways to rebound after he gets hit. And that's the makings of a great Bond villain, because they've got to face off against Bond. And the only time you see that he could be anyway a match for Bond is this utterly atrocious scene. In the original film, Bond faces off with Largo at the Baccarat table. that works because we know Bond is in his element, we know Largo is in his element. Whereas in this case, you've got them playing a video game, which I admit, the game does look pretty interesting, for especially if you like Risk. In this game, you've got Largo, who is obviously proficient in the game, facing off against someone who's just trying the game for the first time. That's essentially a bully trying to pistol whip a blind kid. And Bond, of course, fails multiple times leading up to his big win, and the big win comes out of nowhere. You've only played this game like 3 times, and automatically you're going to topple the guy who practically made the game? Makes no sense! No sense! And all this is to the detriment of Largo as a villain. If that was just one of the few things that doesn't work, I'd say, well, actually, no, I wouldn't say fine. That would still condemn the movie. You could tell that Kevin McClory was so hell-bent to put everything into this movie that it feels bloated, and because it feels bloated, the pacing is awful. It wasn't even to get to the action bit, just to get to anything that was remotely interesting. And it didn't help that not much was interesting in this movie. And you feel bad because you feel like effort was actually put into trying to make this something special, but because of the fact that it's a remake of one of Connery's best Bond movies, and the fact that Kevin McClory just wanted to piss in Eon's pool, the film on the whole is a waste. There is no reason for it to exist. There is absolutely no reason to have any of these very talented people spend so much time and effort to make a very handsomely mounted production for a script that is overcompensating for some paranoia that Bond is archaic, while on the other side trying to establish its own identity. And that is a shame. And now you guys can understand why I had absolutely no desire whatsoever to review this movie or even put it in the same pantheon of all the films I featured on Double November in the first year. But now, speaking of Double November years, I'm going to leave it now down to you. First off, do you agree and do you disagree with my stance on this movie? Comments below. That's what it's for. But more importantly, next year, what do you think we should tackle? Should we tackle the girls? Should we tackle the gadgets? Should we tackle the action sequences? Should we tackle the opening credits combined with the songs? All comments below. Leave it there. So I hope you guys enjoyed Double November. This one was actually even more fun putting together, I admit, because the videos were shorter, but nevertheless, it was still a lot of fun to do this, and I hope you guys enjoyed it even more so, and tell me how much you do. That's what, otherwise I'm going to be like, why should I do this? I don't want to do that. Anyway, let me know. So for the year of 2018, Double November, the file closed.
Never say never again. Never say never again.